talk about characterization, we have to first talk about characters and the types of characters that we see in stories and novels. So every story that you ever read is going to have major characters who are characters that are the major source of the plot. They're there the whole time and they're the main focus of the plot. And every story is going to have minor or supporting characters who help move the story forward, but they're not a major part of the plot. Every story will also have a protagonist and an antagonist. And you'll notice that those words are singular because there's only ever one protagonist and one antagonist. And try your best to remember that because it'll make life a lot easier for you when you have to identify them. Start by talking about the protagonist. And I have a picture here of Gru. If you've ever watched Despicable Me, you know that Gru is the main character of the movie, and he's also the protagonist. So simply put, a protagonist is a main character of the story or the novel. The entire story revolves around this character, and many of you learned in elementary school that this has to be the good guy, or the protagonist is the good guy. And that's sometimes the case, a lot of times it is the case, but it's not always the case. So your protagonist is simply the main character, not necessarily the good guy. And that's the main reason why I picked Gru as the example here, because Gru wanted to steal the moon. Morally, he was not a good person, and while we might like him by the end of the movie, we should not like him because morally he was not a good person. So we can't say that he was good throughout the movie. So whenever you're trying to find the protagonist, my rule of thumb is usually to look for the first character that you meet. That tends to be the protagonist of your story or your novel. So some famous examples of protagonists I got from movies. Harry Potter was a protagonist. Remy from Ratatouille, he was a protagonist. Finding Nemo was a protagonist. Captain America, Batman, Iron Man, Shrek, Sully, if you've ever seen Monsters, Inc., Carl from Up, and Simba from The Lion King. Those are famous examples of protagonists in movies. Whenever you identify the protagonist, you can then identify the antagonist. And I have a picture of Victor here from Despicable Me. He was the antagonist to Gru from Despicable Me. So the antagonist is simply the force that works against a protagonist. And you'll notice that I don't have the word character in there, that it's not the character that works against the protagonist, it's the force. Because sometimes it will be a character that works against the protagonist, other times it will be nature, like maybe the weather got in the way, or it might be fate that got in the way. So whatever works against a protagonist is your antagonist. Again, when we talk about good guy versus bad guy, sometimes the antagonist can be the bad guy, but not always is the antagonist the bad guy. So just remember that the antagonist is always the thing that causes the protagonist the most problem. And it'll make life a lot simpler for you when you identify the antagonist or the protagonist. I have some examples of protagonists versus antagonists for you. To give you some examples, we talked about Gru before being a protagonist. And if he was a protagonist, Victor is the antagonist, the force working against him. If Batman is the protagonist, then the Joker is the antagonist. If Harry Potter is the protagonist, then he who shall not be named is the antagonist. If Simba is the protagonist, then his Uncle Scar is the antagonist, or the force that's working against him. What I'd like you to do now is think of an example of a protagonist or an antagonist of the last book or story that you read. Be sure to write down the title of your book and the protagonist's name and the antagonist's name.
Inside, huh? Almost tempted to go back a few times. But I have unfinished work here. Please, I hope you're hungry, because Epsilon is the finest chef I've ever had. Oh, Epsilon, you've done it again.
Yes! Hey! Hey!
Ellie would have loved all this. You know, it's because of you. She had this dream to come down here and live by Paradise Falls. I'm honored, and now you've made it. You sure we're not a bother? I'd hate to impose. No, it's a pleasure to have guests. A real treat. Having guests is a delight. More often I get thieves come to steal what's rightfully mine. No. They called me a fraud, those... But once I bring back this creature, my name will be cleared. Beautiful, isn't it? Oh, I've spent a lifetime tracking it. Sometimes years go by between sightings. I've tried to smoke it out of that deathly labyrinth where it lives. Can't go in after it. Once in, there's no way out. Lost so many dogs. Here they come, these bandits, and think the bird is theirs to take. But they soon find that this mountain is a very dangerous place.
Hey, that looks like Kevin.
Kevin?
Yeah, that's my new giant bird pet. I trained it to follow us.
Follow you? Was impossible. How?
She likes chocolate.
Chocolate?
Yeah, I gave her some of my chocolate. She goes gaga for it.
But it ran off. It's gone now. You know, Carl, these people who pass through here, they all tell pretty good stories. A surveyor making a map. A botanist cataloging plants. An old man taking his house to Paradise Falls. I mean, that's the best one yet. I can't wait to hear how it ends. Well, it's been a wonderful evening, but we better be going. You're not leaving. We don't want to take advantage of your hospitality. Hey, come on, Russell.
But we haven't even had dessert yet.
Oh, the boy's right. You haven't had dessert. Epsilon here makes a delicious cherries jubilee. Oh, you really must stay. I insist. We have so much more to talk about.
Kevin?